Hello and welcome to Autology, the weekly podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week's episode is called The Reality Bites on Owning Automotive OS, True or False? And you're here with me, Rebecca Bell-Chambers, Thermal Research Analyst at S&P Global Mobility, and today's guests, Mr. Chris Goodall, Vice President, Positioning and Monitoring Systems Business Unit, TDK Corporation, and Dr. Tawhid Khan, Research Director, Supply Chain Technology Software, S&P Global Mobility UK. Hi guys, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of Autology. So Chris, I wondered if you wanted to start just by introducing us to who TDK corporations are and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rebecca. I guess many people may know TDK as a leading electronics company. Really, the focus is on information, community technology, automotive, industrial, consumer electronics, really global international electronics company. Been around for almost 100 years, founded in 1935, and really focused around ferrite magnetics. In terms of an actual sort of product portfolio and where TDK does business, it's quite broad as well. Passive components, obviously, with ferrite, a lot of passive components, many of those going into automotive applications. Same with sensor products and applications, magnetics, and actually almost half of the business as of last year is actually based around energy application products. Our business unit is actually the only business unit within TDK that is solely focused on software. And we're focused on positioning software and monitoring software. And about roughly half or 2/3 of our business is in the automotive space, with the other areas being industrial or a little bit of consumer infotainment, etc.
Okay, that's great. So it sounds like you're the perfect guest for today. So as the auto industry progresses from decentralized architecture to a future centralized control environment, the market is witnessing the increased importance of middleware, and its smooth integration is key to better managing the future system integration. However, the growth has fueled the complexity within automotive software development. And today we're here to talk about these two key factors: the growing complexity of automotive software and the role of automotive middleware to minimize complexity and what the future holds for the supply chain and technology. So my first question is to you, Tawhid. We hear about software complexity from analysts' commentaries. We're also seeing impacts on auto revenues. What's your take on software complexity, and why do we hear it so often?
Thank you, Rebecca. First of all, thank you again for hosting me into this podcast, and I welcome Chris into this podcast. Thank you, Chris, for supporting us. So welcome here. Now, back to the question. We hear about complexity because of various reasons. The key to that is being the new business model. Both OEM and suppliers are trying to use software to generate new revenues and moving away from just simply a product supplier to a solution and service provider. However, this is not easy historically, and in some instances in today's automotive supply chain ecosystem, the software is a subset of hardware. But going forward, what we see is a change in business strategies, which ultimately influence product development processes, meaning that companies are making organizational changes. They are trying to understand market opportunities and gaps and so forth. You can see from various press releases and CEO verbatims that these are indeed a key focus for many OEMs going forward. These are backed up by the R&D investment scenarios we are witnessing in the market. So if we look at the impact on product development, from that point of view, the first one is the architecture. OEMs are working towards centralized system, as you already mentioned in your introduction, Rebecca. They're moving away from one hardware to with one function to one hardware, many function scenarios, using more powerful computational process in a high performance computing platform. In the software context, this means means rewriting or migrating many of the software code into new processing environments. This is a big task. This increases software line of code, increases effort on development, i.e. engineers' time and efforts, hence the cost of development. If we then look at the next one, digital services with software, that requires development of much larger system than just the vehicle itself, which if we look at our current scenario, most of the automakers are primarily involved in and around the vehicle itself. However, as we move forward with software-defined car functions, OEMs has to take ownership of both inside and outside, i.e. cloud computing side, backend platform service development of the vehicle connectivity, as well as vehicle development. And don't forget, all of those development needs to conform to privacy and security regulations and requirements. So in essence, they are becoming not just the developer of a vehicle going forward, but also the integrator of a complete connectivity ecosystem, pushing their involvement outside of the vehicle design to IoT and retail business development world, which is kind of an unknown at this moment of time. And to me, this is the power of software, which causes the seismic shift for automakers, where they once used to be just a user of the software for the product, and going forward, they become the makers of the software in order to sell their services. Now, to the point regarding software complexity is that all of those are a new phenomena for auto industries. So starting from making the sense of the software business model to the software API is something everyone is frantically trying to grasp. So we hear about complexity as we are struggling to quantify how to measure the complexity itself. And to add to that, implementing new software and then maintaining it is a big challenge, especially as the software becomes outdated faster than hardware. And I'm sure Chris can comment on that one as well. So while the auto industry is searching for an answer on beginning of the software complexity cycle, i.e. how to create a software ecosystem, very quickly it becomes the next chapter in the complexity scenario as to how to maintain the software, how to keep updating the software, how to motivate employees to work on the legacy software system while innovating something new, and many other points. So you can see that complexity is not just about product, it's about processes, efficiencies, people as well. It touches all aspects of the automotive product development lifecycle. And as a result, I believe that we are hearing more about it and quite often.
Okay, so Chris, from an industry point of view, do you agree with what Toyd is saying, or is there something more that we're not aware of here?
Yeah, I think there's many directions I could go based on that. So maybe let me just start by stepping back a second and saying that, you know, spending my whole career in software, it's ultimately just a language that is used to accomplish something, and it can't really be done without some kind of hardware, whether you're in the cloud or on a vehicle. And same goes with hardware. You know, hardware is getting to the state now where it's becoming less valuable without software. Its ability to do things is very limited. It's not like it was 20 years ago in vehicles where you could actually do something with hardware alone. But what's actually, I think, happening is that there's, you know, multiple tectonic shifts happening at the same time, which is why it's making software so complex. It's not like we as software developers or suppliers or OEMs can focus in one area. We can't just focus on electric vehicles. We can't just focus on autonomous vehicles. We can't just focus on CO2 emissions reductions. We also have to consider security for all of this because, you know, obviously safety can be compromised if security is not there. Users expect better connectivity, better infotainment, even getting into like retail applications like augmented reality. And then, as Toyd said, you even get into the business shifts, the ownership shifts, the ride sharing and ownership sharing. So unfortunately for vehicles, all of these things are happening at the same time. And that, I think, is what is really driving the complexities in software. If there is one specific area or one specific advancement we could all focus on, it might be obtainable. maybe even obtainable, for instance, by the OEMs themselves. But right now, there's really too much going on, too much advancement in vehicle technology. And I think this is why it's taking lines of code from tens to hundreds of millions, maybe even to billions in the future. But ultimately, I think it's not just the responsibility of OEMs to take care of this. It's responsibility of the whole industry, and that's I think where we're having difficulties, is all of those connections. It's not just system integrations by a single company; it's system integrations by a community. And I think that's where the challenges come. It's something bigger than an individual company. It's something bigger than supplier, OEM, tier one. It's really community-based issue that we're facing because of all of these advancements.
Sure. Okay, so as a way to get rid of, or to help some of this complexity, we hear that more or less all of the OEMs would like to develop their own automotive operating system. So let's just take a step back, and I'll ask this to you, Tawhid. What is an operating system, and why is it important for OEMs to develop their own?
Well, believe it or not, in my conversation with many of our OEM client and also supplier client, that I hear in an argument, and they argue that the term OS is actually misleading terminology used by automakers. And in fairness, they are somewhat fair in their argument. Automakers actually are not developing an operating system, nor do they have the capacity or capability to do that. Developing an OS is a huge task and is not worthwhile effort as well, because this is outside of their remit. But so in that case, what they're doing? What they're doing is that extending the OS by introducing middleware and platform services. Middleware is a software layer that holds many of the enabling functions, which are crucial to maintaining the hardware and software separation. Platform services is a new layer that connects the vehicle with cloud services. As such, a feature like cybersecurity, over-the-air update, etc., resides in this layer. Most importantly, automakers' private and public APIs are developed here for their business and system integration. So in summary, both middleware and platform service are key to future of software-defined function development, as it helps OEMs to in two fronts. First, to help them maintaining control of their system development in terms of spending and maintainability, as well as modernizing their vehicle build and upgrade processes to the point of continuous improvement and development, technically known as CI/CD. And on the second point, this whole new development allows them to move into revenue generating services, like we see in consumer electronics and mobile phone industries, where subscription-based feature or on-demand functions are a way of generating revenue on top of selling hardware. However, I always maintain one problem statement with the current automotive OS trend in the market, and that is not all OEMs or automakers are at the same speed with middleware and platform service development. There are many reasons behind my hypothesis. For one, developing a complete middleware or complete ecosystem for software-defined vehicle is not cheap and easy. It requires ground-up development, and we have heard about the complexity story from Volkswagen's scalable system platform, or in short, SSP development. This platform has gone through full-scale development of EE and software architecture, along with cloud and vehicle platform service communication and level 4 autonomy functions. So it is a very large software-driven development project that requires financial and structural resources. Now, this may be feasible for a large volume OEM like VW. However, there are other small OEMs that lacks volumes and resources. And then the issue of maintainability. Yes, an OEM may well develop their own OS with new EE and software architecture, but to maintain like software and technology companies do, you need large software infrastructure, resources. So for medium to low scale volume auto manufacturer, this OS strategy may not be viable. And that is why we are seeing a flurry of automotive suppliers starting from tier one to semiconductor and software specialized consortium moving into the middleware space, either to facilitate standardization in a middleware specification or to offer their own solution to support OEMs and automakers. So in summary, we will continue to see competition in the middleware and software landscape, as well as we will see the revenues generation from middleware software in terms of framework, SDK, and other licenses in coming years. But I would make a cautionary comment here that overcrowding that we are seeing in the market may influence future market fragmentation and solution take-up rates.
Okay, so it looks like there's a lot that's going to be happening in the industry over the next couple of years. So Chris, this one's for you. What's your take on automotive OS or middleware from industry strands, and how do you see this playing out for both automakers and auto suppliers?
I think we can look at an analogy from the past, which is smartphones. You know, a little bit ahead of vehicles, but people make an analogy to the future vehicle being similar to a smartphone. Obviously, safety and emissions are different, but many of the other values that a smartphone brings will be brought in a vehicle as well. And if you look at how the smartphone middleware OS industry matured and had similar battles in the beginning, I think it'll be very similar with vehicles. At the very beginning of smartphone development, 2005 to 2010, there were some companies that were trying to build open operating systems with standard frameworks that could work across devices for the OEMs, and then there was other companies that wanted to build their own for their own devices. And I mean that battle, you could say, roughly is still going on today, with maybe a 50-50 draw. But certainly a lot of the smaller suppliers, they got pushed out or had to adopt a bigger, more standard framework. And then also even some of the middle size or even some of the large device makers, they couldn't standardize enough or have enough devices to warrant maintaining their own operating system. So I really see the same thing being in vehicles, but maybe, you know, standardization is going to be even more important, especially due to safety. But I think, you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I think a lot of the same battles and the same outcomes will be obtained in vehicles that happen in smartphones.
Okay, so that's a really good analogy. I like that. Okay, so let's finish off with a quick fire round of questions just for a bit of fun. Tawhid, who do you think will win the race on automotive OS? Do you think it'll be OEMs or suppliers?
Well, both sides is my client, so I have to be very careful how I respond to this. As such, so my response would be, I think it is not about who will win the race, but rather how the market will evolve. In my opinion, both automakers and suppliers-driven solution will coexist, even in the longer term. And as you hear from Chris, I think his analogies with regards to mobile phone, this makes this statement even more solid. Maybe what will happen is that those OEMs with scale and high level of product complexity will continue to develop their own in-house operating system to limit the development cost and get the benefit from new software revenues. But rest of the industry will opt for supplier-driven solutions. However, even in that case, I foresee that there will be a level of tailor-made solution that they will have a high level of customization to take some level of system integration ownership compared to having 100% supplier dependency as we see today. And to be honest with you, there will be a small portion where 100% dependency will remain, but I do see that the market is evolving sort of semi-customization.
Yeah, sure. That's a very strategically placed answer there. I like that. Okay, so Chris, I'm going to fire the same to you. Who do you think is going to win the race?
Yeah, I think first off, whoever wins it, we need to have standardization, maybe even open source when it comes to software. But basically, at the end of the day, the OS and the middleware software have to be properly tested and verified before deploying. You know, there's vehicles that are actually, many vehicles are deployed now without 100% code coverage, and that's why a lot of the recalls happen. And the OEMs can't manage all of that testing on their own. So there has to be either some kind of standardization or open source where the OEMs and their suppliers can better work together, where code coverage can be improved. So I think ultimately another thing that has to happen is that the code really has to be built newly from the ground up. It can't, like, it has to be revolutionary, not evolutionary. It can't be built off of old code. And I think the suppliers are better set up to do that. They're just a little bit more nimble, less set in their ways than the OEMs, but it has to be very open and standard so that the OEMs can at least verify it. So I think at the end of the day, that the suppliers may enable it, and then the OEMs will take it the rest of the way.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's all that we have time for today. And on that note, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Chris and Tolweed for joining us today. And to all of you listeners for tuning in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@smpglobal.com email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all of the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode.